Hello, my name is Kay Rizdal, and I will be the practitioner uh, meeting with you today to talk about your possible diagnosis. Thanks for coming in today. How are you? Um, well, I really appreciate you coming in, and I'm looking forward to having this conversation with you. I just want to say, I know I looked at the report from last week when you chatted when you did your intake, but just want to ask you what is your name and what would you like for to be called during this session? Wonderful. Wonderful. I love that name. Beautiful. Well, last kind of little checkpoint I want to make is I just want to reiterate confidentiality. Uh, as you probably talked about last week, this is a confidential relationship. This is a private resource for you. So anything that you share with me, I will keep safe and protected, and only I will not share it with anyone. There are a few instances that I must break confidentiality, and that's just from a care for you and for others perspective. And those are very specific situations. So, for example, if you were to share things with me about harming yourself, thoughts are planned to harm yourself, or thoughts are planned to harm someone else. Those are a couple instances that I would need to break confidentiality. But other than that, this is a space that, yeah, is confidential and private. And so I really hope that we can build a relationship of talking through the things. Wonderful. Okay. Wonderful. Well, I am ready then to chat. I know you talked last week when you did kind of the intake session, and PTSD was the diagnosis that was kind of thought to maybe be what you're experiencing. And so I really want to just look at PTSD, give kind of psychoeducation often, having the words to talk about what we're experiencing, or just the like names and labels of what we're facing, often gives us it empowers us. And so really my hope for this is just give you a greater understanding of what PTSD is, what's possibly happening in your body, in your brain, in your experiences. And then we'll talk a little bit about what its impacts and a little bit of where it came from and kind of those things. So please let me know if you have any questions throughout this whole conversation. Otherwise, we'll jump right in. Okay. So if I can get my, oh, there it is. Okay, PTSD. What is PTSD? PTSD is the abbreviation for post-traumatic stress disorder, which are a lot of big, kind of funky words. The definition in the DSM-5, it's also a little bit of a words we don't use that often, but PTSD is composed of the development of characteristic symptoms following exposure to one or more traumatic events. So in conversational language, that just means is PTSD is the composition or the mix of symptoms and things that a person faces and experiences after they have experienced a traumatic event. So it's just the response via symptoms after, yeah, a stressful and traumatic experience. Before we go any further, I also want to just say DSM-5 is the book that mental health practitioners use to look at symptoms and see what kind of diagnoses are connected to the symptoms and what is possible. So just like as a doctor would have a list, a family practice doctor would have a list of sicknesses and symptoms and how they're connected, that helps them kind of narrow down what might be going on. The DSM-5 is that list for mental health practitioners to look at what symptoms are connected to what diagnoses, and then also to help them decide next steps and figure out the best care possible. So in this slide, I'll be talking a lot about the DSM-5. That is what was used when you did your intake session to look at what you're experiencing, and then to narrow down that, oh, it might be PTSD. So There we go. So the DSM-5 states that PTSD occurs during exposure to actual or threatened death, serious injury, or sexual violence. So the first criteria for a PTSD diagnosis is this exposure or actual threat to these types of traumatic situations. And it could be something that you faced, it could be something that someone you love faced, it could be hearing about something that someone faced, a loved one faced, just all of those criterias. But for sure, exposure to or actual involvement in that kind of experience. The next criteria is an experiencing intrusion symptoms. So this can include things like recurrent, involuntary, and intrusive distressing memories, dreams, or flashbacks. And then the next criteria is persistent avoidance of stimuli associated with the traumatic event. So this could be something like, let's say someone experiences a car accident, a traumatic car accident, and we would think often that individuals frequently are comfortable driving, are comfortable driving, sometimes there's stress with driving in traffic, but in general, we're not avoiding those things. But a person who experienced a traumatic accident and is experiencing PTSD will have persistent avoidance of being in the car, driving in a certain area of town where the accident happened, or maybe it's the person that they're driving with is that's a stimuli associated with a traumatic event. And if someone's experiencing PTSD, they're really trying to avoid those stimuli. The next criteria at the top there is marked alterations in arousal and reactivity. So this could be things like engaging in self-destructive behavior that's like different post the traumatic experience, problems concentrating, and change in sleep, whether that's sleeping more than the individual had before the traumatic experience or sleeping less. But just that change. And then the last criteria that I'll talk about is negative alterations in cognitions and mood. So for example, an inability to remember parts of the traumatic event, persistent negative emotional state. And again, these are a change post the traumatic experience. An important note to make as well is that these symptoms point us to PTSD if they're experienced for longer than 1 month. Before that 1 month comes to an end, there are other things that we could look at, other diagnoses, other very real experiences that people are facing, but PTSD isn't considered as a possible diagnosis until after 1 month post the traumatic experience has occurred. Also like to put in there, experts agree. This is a quote from a study by Foe and some other authors that isn't, quote, it is important to remember that not all trauma victims develop post-traumatic stress disorder, and many who initially develop post-traumatic stress disorder recover over time. So this is again just looking at not everyone faces PTSD, but those that do often are able to recover over time and via some steps that we'll talk about later as well. But nonetheless, post-traumatic stress disorder is something that's very real and that people do face and that we do want to take very seriously and provide care. A few other quick things to share is post-traumatic stress disorder can occur in a couple different ways. This can be after one traumatic experience. So for example, experiencing a traumatic car accident, that can lead to PTSD. Post-traumatic stress disorder can also come about after a series of traumatic events that can span multiple years. So that's called complex PTSD. And there is a little bit of difference there in the symptoms experienced and the after steps, but nothing you have to worry about at this point. But really, this is just showing that it could be that one-time experience, like a car accident. It could also be abuse or neglect over years. Either way, those are criteria that fall under PTSD. Also just want to make the space that anyone can experience PTSD. We see that just in society, some populations might be more at risk for traumatic experiences, but data has so far showed that one population isn't more likely to develop PTSD after a traumatic experience than other populations. And again, this spans all ages and all just experiences and social identities. And then also just this helps me kind of understand PTSD, but post-traumatic stress disorder occurs when an individual's response system, so how they're responding to stimuli and to experiences and reflecting on past experiences, that response system is stuck in survival mode because of the traumatic experience they faced. It's just very much in survival and trying to navigate that. So want to stop here if there's any questions. That was just kind of an overview of what PTSD is. Okay, wonderful. All right, well, if they arise, please let me know. Otherwise, we'll move into the neurobiological, impacts of trauma. So we kind of looked at, PTSD specifically. Now we're going to look at what's kind of happening in the brain when trauma is experienced. So this is coming from a video by Dr. Harris. You've maybe come across some of his videos, but really helps us understand it. So we'll walk through this. In each person's brain, there is a response system or a processing system that there's both slow pathway, also known as the high road, and then there's also, slow pathway, also known as the high road, and a fast pathway, also known as the low road. The high and low is not equivalent to good or bad. They're just doing different things. And those names have to come from different parts of the brain and what those parts do. One is more survival and instinct, emotion-based, and the other one is more evaluating and informed decision. And yes, again, both are important, but at different times and for different things. So we're going to look at the slow pathway first. That's the top one. So when information is gathered and sent to the brain is gathering it, it's going to send, when it's using the slow pathway, that information to the medial prefrontal cortex. This part of the brain is able to take time to evaluate all the different data coming in and really look at the possible threat and evaluate, make an informed decision. Is this a threat? Or is there another explanation for this? So then after evaluating that, the medial prefrontal cortex will send the information on to the rest of the body, of the brain, to determine next steps. So that's a slower process, a more informed, if you want to say, a more slow and is able to take the time to gather information and look at the whole picture. But there are also times when our body needs to make a fast response, especially when experiencing perceiving things that could be threats that would immediately harm us. So that's when we look at the fast pathway on the bottom there. During the fast pathway, the brain is sending information to the part of the brain called the amygdala, which is sometimes called it's part of the emotional part of the brain. I think it's also helpful to look at that as more the maybe instinct or quick decision making of it, just something needs to be done now. And so the amygdala takes in information and will send info through the sympathetic nervous system. And this process is really what we talk about when we say things like fight or flight. This is in Dr. Harris's video. the information is getting to the security guard from the amygdala, and the security guard is having to decide, okay, do we need to go take care of the situation right now, or do we need to back away and protect ourselves? And so that's kind of what the amygdala is doing, not really taking time to look at the situation, but more responding, okay, how do we respond to best protect ourselves and best navigate and work towards survival in this situation? So again, both ways the brain works are very important at different times. But the thing we're interested in within this conversation of PTSD is what happens in a brain that is traumatized or experiences traumatic events. So in a traumatized brain, the default pathway is the fast pathway, which is one we just talked about the amygdala. And that's used as the default. So because the person is in, as we talked about before, like survival mode, and really in that like self-preservation, self-navigating for survival, kind of on guard, the brain is sending stimulus into the fast pathway through the amygdala and through the sympathetic nervous system, which is then kind of the reason why we're seeing people with PTSD experience the symptoms that they do. It's just how their brain is comprehending and looking at things and kind of just, for lack of a better way to put it, stuck in that survival mode, stuck in sending any perceived threat, whether it is now, whether it was, all these different considerations, but continually sending it through the fast pathway, which is then leading to quicker responses and not being able to take that time and think about what is this threat, which is, what we often see again, where the symptoms are coming from, maybe when for a person who is experiencing PTSD. So that was kind of a quick overview, but I also want to respect our time today. But that's kind of what's happening. I have the video linked later on if you want to go and watch this video as well. But kind of my last couple things is I want to just, again, provide a place for any questions that you might have right now. Okay. No, yes, no worries. Let me know as they come up. I know it can be a lot to process and hear about, so just let me know. And that leads into my second point of I really want to walk through this with you. This can be a lot. The symptoms you're experiencing are a lot. The traumatic experience that you faced is a lot. And so I really am hopeful that you will let me walk through this with you, and kind of figure out how we can best support and best care for you. I also just want to let you know that we just heard a lot of things, but there is healing possible. The step that you just took of taking all this information in through psychoeducation, that's a huge step I talked about before, that just like gives you the power to call things out, to identify them, and just to understand what might be happening in your body and in your mind. There's also different other therapy type interventions we can do. CBT is one, which is cognitive behavioral therapy, which we'll dive into more later, but something that is often very helpful for individuals experiencing post-traumatic stress disorder, as well as other things like relaxation coping skills of when you're experiencing these symptoms, what are things that could be beneficial, and to put those tools in your tool belt to navigate and feel in a better spot. So you don't need to hold any of that right now, but I want you to know that there are steps we can take, and I'm here to navigate that with you. If you're ready and want to go on this journey together. And then here are just some resources. Like I said, the video is connected here, but okay, well, I will see you next week. Let me know if you have any questions that arise. Thanks for coming in, and have a great day.